Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, thank you for those very kind remarks, and it's certainly an honor for me to be here with Kevin as your co-host, and good morning to you. Let me begin by sharing a quote that came out in 2012 by CIBC, and the quote goes as follows. They said there is an irreversible structural force that suggests the next decade will see the strongest startup activity in the Canadian economy on record. 12 months later, the BMO Financial Group reported the following. They said the entrepreneurial spirit is alive among young Canadians. The BMO report went on to say that nearly half of Canadian students see themselves as either starting a business after graduation or at least having it as secondary employment. We have also heard concerns with our Canadian productivity. But as far as policy goes, startups have not been central to our plans. Regardless, as both reports suggest, startups are moving forward. But I suggest to you that our strength will be enhanced by putting startups at the center of innovation strategy, not at the periphery. And we can follow the leads of places like New York City and Israel. In both these locations, startup success has been a central theme of economic growth. In my panel later today, I'll in fact be speaking to Rafi directly on his experience in Israel. But startup success takes more than government. It takes all of us. We must have a culture of being startup friendly. As mentioned in the introductions, we started what is called the Digital Media Zone 3.5 years ago, and the success has been surprising even to us. Not only the companies that have been successful, but also the valuation of companies like 500 Pixels, a company that I refer to as Instagram for doctors, it's called Figure One, and a company that's called Flybits, and a company, in fact, called Who Plus You that the board and chamber itself uses, and many, many more. But although we never planned that major companies would join the zone, that is, in fact, what has happened. They come and bring their employees, believing that bringing their employees into the zone and working alongside more than 500 entrepreneurs is a better route for innovation than traditionally within their own organization. And as mentioned, the success of the zone has spurred the Ryerson Futures, which is a private for-profit company that looks after the investments of many of the companies and has opened a digital media zone with the Bombay Stock Exchange in Mumbai, India, and plans to do the same in both Brazil and China. We've had the opportunity to bring students from the IITs in India, from the University of Tel Aviv in Israel, and right now from the Communications University in China, where they have not only brought their talent, they brought their companies. And very recently, a colleague of mine who is here with us, Graham Henderson, has said, why not open up a zone for music where the digital products can be incubated as well? Yesterday, we heard how important it is to seek new markets. I can tell you that there is a huge opportunity for us if we bet on the younger generation. It is a solid bet with very, very high returns. But together we need to embrace startups, we have to be friendly, and we have to share the risk with them and put their success at the center of our strategy. And if we do, I can assure you our future will be brighter. And now, ladies and gentlemen, my colleague, Kevin Lynch.
Thank you, Sheldon. I think everybody would share my view that I wish we could clone Sheldon throughout the province. And good morning. let me first add my welcome to this timely summit and also express my sincere thanks to the committed partners Ann went through the list who've worked hard and contributed much to make today a reality, led by the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and its president, Alan Odette, and his great team. Alan, you and your team do a really great job. Congratulations. And second, let me add my perspective to that of Sheldon's as to why this year's Ontario Economic Summit is important. I would argue, I think we're getting to a point where it's really pivotal. We have to make some changes and decisions, and we have to do them collectively, as we said last night. Now, the answer to that, I think, lies in looking at the broader question of where is Ontario's future economic growth going to come from, and with it, the jobs that we want for our young people. And how much has the world changed in the aftermath of the global financial crisis, but also the pervasive globalization and changed nature of competition around the world. In many ways, that's precisely what the Jobs and Prosperity Council of Ontario, which I had the honor to be the vice chair, wrestled with in producing its report entitled Advantage Ontario. But it's also precisely what the Ontario Chamber of Commerce kind of confronted in its report, Emerging Stronger 2013. We're asking the same question. How do we make sure that we have the growth over the next 20 years and the jobs and the standard of living that we've enjoyed over the last 20? And actually doing the same thing the same way is not the answer to that question. So the starting point for both reports is that the world has changed, and has changed profoundly, and that we in Ontario have to adapt and adapt quickly to the new global reality. Now, Ontario has many, many strengths when it comes to taking advantage of these global shifts, but there are also challenges. And if we're going to realize our potential, the status quo is simply not an option as we go forward. And that's true for all of us. And the minister will talk about that later on the trade side, where his government is bringing forward some important changes. Now, the Ontario advantages, and there are many, include a well-educated workforce, a good public education system, strong universities and research centers, a financial service center that's amongst the world's best and soundest, as the minister said last night, competitive corporate taxes, and abundant natural resources. And that's a fantastic base. But that's our potential, not our entitlement. And we've got to ask ourselves, how do we turn that potential into reality? And we also have some sobering challenges in Ontario, and let me consider four. First, Ontario's productivity growth rates have been declining for decades, and the last decade was the worst of the lot. And our average business productivity levels today in Ontario are 72% of U.S. levels. And we don't have the subsidy of an undervalued dollar to actually support that productivity performance going forward. The second is Ontario business spends only 50% as much on ICT, information and communications technologies, as our comparable competitors in the United States, and only invests 75% as much per capita in machinery and equipment. And both of those are instrumental to productivity growth. Three, our business spending on R&D is above the Canadian average, but that's not really a victory because Canada ranks 22nd in the OECD for business spending on R&D. We're below Slovakia, Croatia, and Luxembourg, those OECD innovation powerhouses. And frankly, that's just not good enough. I mean, think about it. We spend 1.3% of our GDP on R&D business in Ontario. That's half the United States. That's a third of Sweden. That's a quarter of Israel. That's a quarter of Sweden. That's just not, frankly, good enough. And lastly, Ontario's exports are hugely concentrated in the OECD countries, largely the United States and Europe, at a time when the slow-growing parts of the world are the United States and Europe, and only about 11% of our exports go to the dynamic emerging economies. Indeed, other than China, there's not a single emerging economy that we export 1% of our exports to, and China is only 3%, and it's largely natural resources. Now, the list is not meant to engender pessimism, but to encourage realism. We can and we should be optimistic for Ontario's future, provided we do things differently, we embrace change, not resist it, and we aggressively take Advantage Ontario to the world. Our report, and it's very much the same as that of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, are first, we need to encourage our firms to go global We cannot kind of build kind of the firms, we can't create the jobs, we can't create the growth, we can't create the standard of livings by trading in our traditional markets. Secondly, we have to drive productivity in our firms, we have to establish world-class transportation infrastructure, and we've got to move up the value-added chain in our natural resources. Three, we've got to spur, as Sheldon said, innovation, accelerate commercialization, and actually push entrepreneurship. And fourthly, we have to capitalize on talent. In a demographically challenged world, talent is key. And we've got to make sure that we're not just pretty good in Ontario, but we're the best, and make that Ontario's comparative advantage above all others. So the recommendations from the Jobs and Prosperity Council report and that of Emerging Stronger are not partisan, nor are they directed solely at government. We believe, and the Ontario Council, Chamber of Commerce believes, that we all have a role in strengthening our future growth, our employment prospects, and our standard of living, just as we all have a stake in our success. Which brings us to today in the 2013 Ontario Economic Summit with, I think, the apt title of Convening for Success, because that's exactly what we all have to do over these 2 days. I urge you to focus on solutions that have a global orientation, not a local one, a relentless focus on productivity and innovation, a fixation with talent, creativity, and entrepreneurship, as Sheldon said. Our economic future, but more importantly, that of our children and grandchildren, depends on it. Thank you.